The chill of the crypt air still clung to Seraphina, even as the sunlight streamed through the unfamiliar window. It wasn't the ornate, stained glass panel of the grand manor she remembered, but a simple, leaded pane in a modest chamber. Her heart, which had ceased its frantic beat just moments ago, now pulsed with a terrifying, exhilarating rhythm. The memories, sharp and unforgiving, were not of this new room, but of a past life, a past choice, and a past agonizing regret. She had died consumed by it, and somehow been granted a horrifying second chance. In that life, she was Lady Seraphina, the cherished eldest daughter, courted by two brothers, the charismatic, silver-tongued Julian and his older, reclusive sibling, Kaelen. Julian was all light and laughter, Kaelen all shadow and scars, a brooding mystery. Her heart, young and naive, had been captivated by Julian's dazzling charm, his promises of a life filled with joy and ease. She had chosen him, leaving Kaelen to his solitude, dismissing the quiet intensity in his eyes as mere bitterness, a choice that, in her dying moments, she knew had condemned them all. The true torment, however, had been her sister, Lyra. After Seraphina's marriage to Julian, Kaelen, scorned and withdrawn, had become a figure of quiet terror in their lives. Seraphina had witnessed, from the gilded cage of her own unfulfilling marriage, Lyra's spirit slowly crushed under Kaelen's supposed cruelty. The details were hazy now, shrouded by the fog of her own suffering, but the image of Lyra's pale, tear-streaked face, her whispered fears of Kaelen's coldness, remained seared into Seraphina's soul. Kaelen, the silent beast, the man she believed capable of such slow, deliberate torment. And so, here she was again, reborn, into a world eerily similar yet subtly different. The names, the faces, the family, all familiar, yet standing on the precipice of a different fate. This time, the choice was still laid before her, though subtly altered. Julian still held his charm, still extended his captivating hand. But this time, Seraphina knew. She knew the emptiness behind Julian's smile, the hollowness of his promises. And she knew, or believed she knew, the darkness that lay within Kaelen. This time, she would not choose for love or comfort. She would choose for protection. Her decision was a calculated, painful sacrifice. To marry Kaelen, to step into the perceived maw of the beast, was the only way she could imagine protecting Lyra. If she was Kaelen's wife, surely he could not turn his malice upon her sister. She would endure whatever suffering he inflicted, so long as Lyra remained safe, unharmed by the man Seraphina believed to be a monster. The wedding was a muted affair, held in a quiet chapel. Kaelen, still scarred, still withdrawn, accepted her hand with a formality that bordered on disinterest, his eyes, dark pools she could not read, revealing nothing. The first few weeks of her marriage were a silent dance of unease. Kaelen was rarely present, spending his days in the estate's sprawling library or his private study. When he did appear, his manner was polite, distant, almost excessively courteous. He ate his meals in silence, offering only brief, clipped responses when spoken to. There was no overt cruelty, no raised voice, no menacing glance. But Seraphina remained vigilant, her senses honed, searching for the subtle signs of the monster she remembered. She waited for the mask to slip, for the true darkness to emerge. It was during this tense period of quiet observation that her new ability first manifested. It began subtly, a faint whisper of emotion against her fingertips when she picked up a forgotten teacup, a lingering warmth of contentment. Then a sharper, more vivid surge when she handled an old, worn tapestry in her new chamber, a fleeting image of a child's joyful laughter, a mother's gentle hand. It was as if objects, once inert, now hummed with the echoes of their past interactions, imbued with the emotional residue of those who had held them. This wasn't a curse. It was a gift, a tool, a way to uncover the truth, perhaps, about Kaelen. She began to experiment, touching mundane objects, then more significant ones. A heavy leather-bound book in the drawing room revealed the quiet satisfaction of a scholar. A child's discarded wooden soldier, the vibrant thrill of imaginary battles. Her hands became conduits, her mind a receiver, translating the unspoken language of touch into raw emotional memories. She felt the fear, the joy, the sorrow, the love that clung to the very fabric of the world around her. Her initial goal remained fixed: to understand Kaelen. She sought out his personal belongings, driven by a morbid curiosity and a desperate need to confirm her suspicions. She expected to touch his things and be overwhelmed by a torrent of rage, a cold, calculating malice, perhaps even flashes of the cruelty she remembered him inflicting upon Lyra. She imagined seeing the shadows that must have festered within him, confirming his monstrous nature, justifying her sacrificial marriage. Her first foray into his study, a room rarely used by anyone else, felt like a clandestine mission into enemy territory. Her fingers brushed against the polished surface of his heavy oak desk, expecting to feel the tremor of a temper barely contained. Instead, a wave of profound, aching loneliness washed over her. It wasn't the active, angry loneliness of rejection, but a deep, pervasive quiet, like a vast, empty room. She saw fragmented images: a young boy, perhaps 7 or 8, sitting alone at this desk, painstakingly copying letters, his brow furrowed, not in frustration, but in a quiet, self-imposed diligence. No other children, no playful interruptions, just the solitary pursuit of knowledge. Next, she touched a heavy iron-bound chest tucked away in a corner, containing what she assumed would be old documents or weapons. What she felt was a sharp, sudden pang of loss, followed by a surge of fierce, protective loyalty. The memory attached was of a younger Kaelen, barely a teenager, standing firm against a larger, older boy, taking a blow meant for someone else. Seraphina saw a fleeting image of a small, frightened girl cowering behind him, her eyes wide, then relief. It wasn't Lyra, not her sister, but a different child, a protector, not a tormentor. Confused, she moved to a worn leather-bound journal, its pages filled with neat, precise script. She braced herself for dark musings, for angry diatribes, but instead she felt a profound sense of wistful longing, a yearning so intense it made her own heart ache. The memories that bloomed were not of shadows, but of fleeting sunlight. She saw Kaelen, a small boy, sharing a secret with another child, a girl with bright, curious eyes and a quick, impish smile. They were digging for buried treasures, whispering dreams under a starlit sky. The emotional echoes were pure, innocent affection, a deep, abiding connection. Over the following days, Seraphina became a ghost in Kaelen's private spaces. The library, his study, a forgotten attic trunk filled with childhood keepsakes, each object she touched slowly chipped away at the edifice of her perceived truth. She touched a smooth, river-polished stone in a velvet pouch and saw Kaelen, perhaps 6 years old, painstakingly painting a tiny flower on it for the same bright-eyed girl. The memory was saturated with patient affection, a child's earnest desire to bring joy. The emotional signature was unmistakable: pure, unadulterated love, uncomplicated, and fiercely devoted. A faded miniature portrait tucked into an old book revealed the girl's face more clearly. Her hair was a warm auburn, her eyes a startling shade of green. She looked remarkably familiar, a feeling that tugged at the edges of Seraphina's memory, though she couldn't place it. Kaelen's memory of this portrait was one of profound tenderness, a moment frozen in time, filled with the promise of a shared future. The pain that accompanied it was a raw, gaping wound of loss, as if the world had ended when that girl was gone. She found a small, intricate carving of a bird, expertly whittled from a single piece of wood. When her fingers closed around it, she felt Kaelen's youngest pride, his quiet determination, and the deep, almost spiritual joy he felt presenting it to the girl. "For you," he'd whispered in the memory, his young voice thick with emotion. The girl had clutched it to her chest, her eyes alight with unadulterated adoration for his silent, devoted friend. Every memory she unearthed spoke of the same constant: Kaelen, always alone in his quiet intellect, always sacrificing, always protecting, and always loving this girl. He was a silent guardian, a patient teacher, a loyal confidant. He shared his books, his thoughts, his dreams with her. He dried her tears, celebrated her small victories, and stood as a formidable, if quiet, bulwark against any perceived threat. This Kaelen bore no resemblance to the monster she had built in her mind, the one who had supposedly tormented her sister. The more she saw, the more disoriented Seraphina became. Where was the rage? Where was the cruelty? Instead, she saw moments of profound self-sacrifice. She found an old tattered blanket, and touching it, saw a vivid memory of a cold, stormy night. Kaelen, still a boy, giving his only blanket to the shivering girl, enduring the chill himself with a quiet, resigned expression. He never asked for praise, never sought recognition. His love for this friend was a selfless, giving force, a quiet flame that burned steadily through all his memories. One particularly poignant memory came from a small, unremarkable wooden box in his study. Inside, nestled among dried flowers, was a single silver locket. Seraphina recognized it instantly. It was identical to one she herself had worn as a child, given to her by her mother on her 7th birthday. When she touched it, Kaelen's memory of the locket was overwhelming. He had found it, lost and gleaming in the grass, after a particularly boisterous game of hide-and-seek. He had held it, a treasure belonging to her, the girl, his childhood friend, before carefully returning it to her. A jolt ran through Seraphina. The silver locket, her locket. The memory of losing it and Kaelen finding it, it was her memory, buried deep, almost forgotten. Her breath hitched. The auburn hair, the green eyes in the miniature portrait, the particular impish smile, the specific, unique, shared jokes and secrets, the feeling of being completely understood. It wasn't just familiar, it was hers. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, staggering her, stripping away the carefully constructed facade of her new life. She wasn't just seeing Kaelen's memories, she was seeing their memories. The girl, Kaelen's lost childhood friend, the one he loved so deeply, was her, Seraphina. Not the lady Seraphina who had chosen Julian, but the Seraphina of innocent childhood, before the world had complicated everything, before choices were made. Her own forgotten childhood resonated with these visions. She remembered the river stone, the bird carving, the shared dreams. She remembered Kaelen, her quiet, unwavering protector, the boy who always knew how to make her smile. The implication was terrifying, liberating, and utterly heartbreaking. Her entire purpose in this new life, her sacrifice, her judgment of Kaelen, all of it was built on a foundation of a colossal misunderstanding. She had loved him as a child, and he had loved her in return, with a depth and purity that eclipsed everything else. The Kaelen she knew in the past life, the scarred recluse, was a man heartbroken, not inherently cruel. And the Kaelen she remembered as tormenting her sister, that memory felt suddenly fragile, distorted. Seraphina stumbled back, her mind reeling. If Kaelen loved her with such intensity, if he had been her devoted childhood friend, then her memories of his cruelty towards Lyra in the past life simply couldn't align. It was a paradox that threatened to unravel her very sanity. How could the boy who gave his blanket to a shivering child become the man who inflicted subtle psychological torture on her sister? The pieces didn't fit. Her memories of Lyra's suffering, once so clear, now shimmered with an unsettling ambiguity. She began to re-examine her past life, not through the lens of her own grief and regret, but through Kaelen's rediscovered love for her. What if her sister's pain wasn't from Kaelen, but because of him, or for her? What if her own perception, clouded by her marriage to Julian and Kaelen's withdrawal, had misinterpreted events? The pieces of the puzzle began to rearrange themselves into a far more complex and painful picture. She recalled the specifics of Lyra's suffering, the hushed whispers, the tearful pleas. Lyra had always spoken of Kaelen's coldness, his disregard, his silent judgment. Never of physical abuse, rarely of direct verbal cruelty, but a deeper, more insidious pain born of neglect and disapproval. And then Seraphina remembered a key detail she had dismissed: Lyra's desperation to gain Kaelen's approval, his attention. Lyra had always been enamored with Kaelen, despite, or perhaps because of, his reclusive nature. What if Kaelen, heartbroken by Seraphina's choice of Julian, had simply become utterly indifferent to love, to romantic entanglements? What if Lyra, seeing her sister settled with Julian, had then tried to win Kaelen's affections, and Kaelen, still nursing a profound wound, had simply pushed her away, unable or unwilling to reciprocate? His coldness could have been grief, his disregard, a desperate attempt to protect his heart. Lyra's pain would have been real, but the source, less malevolent, more tragic. Unrequited love, amplified by a man still reeling from a lost connection. Then came the deeper, more unsettling possibility. What if Lyra, seeing her sister's chosen husband, Julian, for the shallow, self-serving man he was, had been trying to warn Seraphina? What if Lyra had sought Kaelen's protection from Julian, and Kaelen, seeing his beloved Seraphina trapped in a miserable marriage, had tried to help Lyra escape Julian's influence, leading to misunderstandings? Or worse, what if Lyra had loved Kaelen so fiercely that she had become jealous of Seraphina's childhood connection to him, subtly manipulating Seraphina's perceptions? The most chilling revelation, however, lay in the absence of any malice from Kaelen towards her or her family in his memories. He never wished them ill. Even after Seraphina chose Julian, Kaelen's pain was internal, a withdrawal, not an outward act of vengeance. He had retreated into himself, guarding the memory of their childhood, unable to reconcile it with her decision. His scars, perhaps, were not just physical, but emotional, etched deeper by a love lost and a profound sense of betrayal. She remembered now, fleetingly, in the blur of her own past life's misery, that Julian had been unkind, even cruel to Lyra. He had used her, manipulated her, perhaps even physically harmed her. Seraphina, caught in her own golden cage, had been too blind, too caught up in her own suffering and misdirection, to see the true dynamics. Lyra's whispers of suffering and cruelty, were they directed at Julian, but filtered through Seraphina's predisposition to blame Kaelen, the man she had hurt? Had Seraphina projected her own guilt onto Kaelen, seeing him as the monster because it was easier than confronting her own terrible judgment? The weight of this new truth crashed down upon her, bringing with it a wave of profound guilt and sorrow. She had condemned an innocent man, not once, but twice. In her past life, she had chosen Julian, shattering Kaelen's heart. In this new life, she had chosen Kaelen, not out of love, but out of a misguided sense of duty and a false belief in his malevolence, reopening old wounds in a different way. She had seen a shadow where there was only profound grief. She had sought a monster and found a broken heart, beating still with a love meant for her. Seraphina found Kaelen in the library, as she often did. He was engrossed in a heavy tome, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across his familiar, scarred face. His expression was one of quiet contemplation, tinged with a familiar, wistful loneliness. He looked up as she entered. His dark eyes, once unreadable, now seemed to hold a flicker of surprise, perhaps even a hint of a question. She walked towards him, her heart thumping with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. The memories she had seen, the emotions she had felt, had changed her completely. The calculating wife, the avenging angel, had melted away, leaving only the little girl who once loved him, and the woman who now saw him for who she truly was. She extended her hand, not to touch an object, but to touch him, to bridge the chasm of years, of lives, of monumental misunderstandings. Kaelen hesitated, his eyes searching hers. Then slowly, tentatively, he reached out, his calloused fingers gently enclosing hers. The moment their skin met, it was as if a dam broke. A torrent of his unspoken emotions flooded her. The shock of her unexpected presence, the ghost of a hope he hadn't dared to nurture, the lingering ache of their shared past, the profound, unyielding love he had carried for her through years of solitude. But there was also a raw, unguarded pain, a quiet query about her true intentions in marrying him, a fear of being hurt again. She didn't need words. The deluge of his pure, unwavering affection, his quiet strength, his hidden tenderness, confirmed everything she had discovered. And in that moment, she also felt the faint, distant echo of a childhood memory, his hand clasping hers under a starlit sky, two children making a silent promise to always be together. It was a promise that had been broken, but now, perhaps, could be mended. Tears streamed down Seraphina's face, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming understanding and regret, and a fragile, burgeoning hope. She sank to her knees before him, her other hand coming up to touch the faint scars on his cheek, the marks of a past she now knew held more sacrifice than malice. "Kaelen," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, I remember everything." His eyes widened, reflecting a flicker of profound confusion, then a dawning, terrifying comprehension. He felt the sincerity in her touch, the genuine sorrow, the deep connection that resonated with his own guarded heart. She had seen it all, his hidden life, his secret love, his lonely sacrifice. He pulled her gently to her feet, his hands framing her face, his gaze searching hers with an intensity that laid bare his soul. "Seraphina," he breathed, his voice hoarse with emotions he had kept locked away for a lifetime. "You remember?" His words were a question, a plea, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible truth now laid bare between them. The past, the present, the two lives, all converged in that single, shared moment of profound recognition. This was not a marriage of sacrifice, but a second chance at a love that had been tragically severed. Seraphina had walked into this life believing she was confronting a monster, only to find the fiercely loyal, deeply loving heart of her lost childhood friend. And in doing so, she had not only rediscovered Kaelen, but she had rediscovered herself, and the true, enduring power of a connection that transcended time and fate. Their future, once dictated by bitter memory, now stretched before them, a blank canvas waiting to be painted with the vibrant, truthful hues of a love reborn.